we're being told that we're more divided than we ever have been in history, but I actually think we are more united, and we just need to find that and celebrate that and actually work together on building a country. That's what this country is, right?
And boom, we are live. What's up, everybody? Couple Casuals podcast. I am your host, Stefano. And guys, we have a very interesting conversation for you guys today. My guest today is an absolute powerhouse in the world of real estate. He is the host of the #1 real estate podcast in Canada called the Canadian Real Estate Investor Podcast. And guys, for today's discussion, we will be discussing the colliding worlds of real estate and politics. And guys, today's episode is brought to you by Canada First. Secure your home with Canada's best home fortification. Visit them at canadafirst.com to learn more. So with that being said, I want to welcome Daniel Foch to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
I appreciate it. Yes, sir, man. So much going on, man.
I know.
In Ontario, in Canada, with the market, with real estate. So much to get into, man. It's it's pretty fucking crazy, eh?
It is, man. I mean, I remember growing up and like hearing my dad always talk about like the 1990s and how crazy it was for real estate, for the economy. Like it was just a mess. I feel like that's like the moment we're going through for our generation now. I think so. Yeah. I think so.
Yeah. Cause it's, I got personal questions I want to ask you. You know, you come with data, you come with facts. I really commend you on what you're doing on your end. And I think, it's needed right now big time. Cause in the world that we live in with social media and everything, it's this information that we have access to with people like yourself, bringing that to the forefront. They didn't have that in the 90s, bro.
It's true. Yeah.
They didn't have that, right?
Yeah.
So now we do.
Yeah, I would think like back then, I mean, even like just a couple of years ago, you were forced to trust like whatever, the big bank economists were saying and so we never really had like a real read on market sentiment. But now I think you have more voices online than ever before. And so you can really easily get a read on market sentiment.
Exactly.
By seeing, and that's what drives the whole thing, right?
It does, right? That influences the market too, quite a bit, doesn't it?
100%.
Something happens crazy in the United States. Maybe Trump drops some interesting statements here and there, and the market might shift here and there.
Sure.
It's pretty crazy. But I think the best place for us to start before we dive into so much interesting stuff, bro, is I know it's cliche and you probably answered it a million times, but give everybody, like for the viewers tuning in, that maybe want to get a little bit of the background of Dan and sort of the value that you bring to the industry, because it's pretty significant.
Yeah. So I've been in the real estate business my entire adult life. I grew up in a real estate family, and when I did my undergrad, I worked at a real estate brokerage, like basically doing admin. Worked as a leasing agent in university. Did my undergrad at BCom and majoring in real estate at the University of Guelph, and then I got right into like family business, just buying and selling, like basically being a realtor like everyone else in Toronto. And progressed from there. Like I found I was really young, and a lot of people didn't trust me because I was like 22, and I just started using data to like build trust. It was like you can't really deny what I'm saying if it's like if I can empirically verify it.
People respect that.
Yeah, and so it just started building from there. I just like started putting out market reports regularly, which is like something that most like social media gurus or like anyone in the real estate coaching space will encourage real estate professionals to do. But I just really did the best job that I possibly could at it. I just took off from there. And now I have like a pretty big following of professionals in the real estate industry who rely on me for their market insights on a monthly basis. So I think I have like one of the biggest followings as a realtor in the country. I've been published. I think at least this year I was the most published realtor in the country, like Wall Street Journal, etc. And then I host Canada's #1 real estate podcast, and I co-own a real estate brokerage that's like an AI company called Valerie.ca.
Right. Yeah. Tell me about that a little bit. What exactly is that?
I mean, basically, like we're trying to make the real estate industry more efficient, right? Like realtors are seeing, everybody hates them, right? Like they're, I mean, let's be real.
Why is that, you think?
I think that it's a low barrier to entry to the industry, and so you do get a lot of like people who probably aren't very passionate about the job or want to be excellent at their job.
They want to extract wealth as much as they can from the industry, so people pick that up as disingenuous. But then there's individuals like yourself that the other side of the coin, so it's quite refreshing. Yeah,
like any industry, I think there's like a 80-20 or 90-10 distribution, but during a period of time where it was really easy to sell a house, it was oversubscribed market, like the market that we saw during the pandemic. I think people really got pissed off that realtors were making an insane amount of money for doing basically no work, and I don't know, a little bit of like jealousy, I guess, or envy, but also just like they weren't adding a ton of value. And so I think now we've taken the pause button. There's not as much volume, and people expect the real estate industry to compress their fees a little bit. You see like 1% listing advertisements everywhere, cashback realtors, etc. But a lot of agents, especially ones who do produce a lot, it's hard for them to make that concession on price if they're not running an efficient business.
Which is fair. Yeah, totally fair. And I feel that, would you agree that well, I guess you would agree, from coming from Valerie, is that the real estate industry is ultimately possibly going to be in the artificial intelligence realm, probably in the near future, right?
Yeah, I would say like the first thing that'll go is like administrative assistance. So like the highest producing realtors have like an administrator, right? Like full time, if not more than one. Most administrative tasks can now be automated by AI, or automated or replaced by AI. So let's say about 70%. So you can get 70% improvement in efficiency if you know what you're doing, or you work with a company like ours that does that stuff. That eventually should translate in, okay, well, I'm working less to do the same output, and so I can actually afford to charge less money now. And I think eventually, like 70 to 80% of the job will be replaced by technology, and the very small portion, which is probably the most important portion, is building relationships, understanding customers' needs, and delivering customer service. That'll be, kind of like going on showings, spending time with people, talking through. I don't do the qualitative stuff, so it's hard for me to even describe it. But that's probably the function of a realtor in 10 years. And I also think the other shift that I'm seeing right now, and this is kind of like where it crosses over to politics, is like for the first time ever on the Toronto Real Estate Board, more transactions this year were leases than sales. So we're shifting towards a renter's economy.
Makes sense, yeah.
Yeah. And with that, realtors are going to become leasing agents in the next 10 years.
Interesting. Yeah, that's really interesting. In the next 10, so you think it will possibly stay that way then?
I don't see a viable path for us to have our homeownership rate to start to increase. Like there's no version of Canada's economy in which I think that's an outcome.
That's fair. Yeah. That's totally fair. Now, before we jump into that, just staying on real estate, like realtors in general, I read somewhere, we spoke about it, me and Dean, on the podcast earlier in the year. Is it true that a lot of agents are actually exiting the industry right now? So we're already sort of seeing that happen, right?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's just going to happen. Like, so one of the things it's funny, like you'll see a drop off now because this time of year, agents have to pay $2,000 to their like licensing fee each year. And then what happens is you see a big drop off into January, and then maybe like March or April, they, somebody in their family or their network needs to do a deal. So they'll pay the fee again, and then it climbs through the year as people get back in, and then it drops again. But we are in a market where the number of realtors is declining because, in 2020, and 2021, the amount of money you could make in the industry was 50% higher than it is right now.
Yeah, that was the time, right? You probably saw such an increase of realtors come into the industry, and now we're seeing them exit. But exactly. That was like the golden era, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure it was. Yeah, like it was like no work, at least for a listing agent. For a buyer agent, it was just show properties and throw random Hail Mary offers at them, and everybody was working from home. They had free time. We were all moving everywhere. Millennials were moving. There was a huge exodus out of the city. So it was definitely the heyday for realtors. And I think that the idea that we'll ever get back to that is pretty naive, right? Like I think we're already in what a normal market would be. It feels really depressed, but it's actually normal.
It's actually which we'll get into. What do you think, like some of the challenges that maybe a Canadian realtor in this market would deal with that maybe like in other places around the world that they're not necessarily dealing with?
I think housing affordability is probably the big one.
Mm-hmm.
You see that in some countries like in the Anglosphere, Australia, basically anywhere where we've got, massive amount of immigration and low interest rates and stupid zoning policy. So, the U.S. doesn't really have that problem because there's a lot of areas to, like you hear about it in the U.S. and they're always complaining about housing affordability and how it's really bad based on, mortgage rates and house prices and whatever. But Canada is very unique in such that like nobody can afford houses. That's why the market is where it is. And you won't see the market recover until people can afford houses again.
If someone was to break into my house, honestly, I wouldn't know what to do. That's something I hear often. And my response, well, don't let them break in. I'm Chad, former RCMP. Did you know that there's an average of 6 home invasions in the Greater Toronto Area daily? At Canada First, we deliver a home defense audit. We find your weak points and we show you how to prevent break-ins. We are here to fortify your home and stop intruders before they even try. Protect your home and what matters most with Canada First. Book your free home defense audit now.
Yeah, let's talk about the Canadian market now. What is your overall thoughts and assessment of kind of where we are, how we got here, and just your overall interpretation of what's going on here?
Well, I think you had the perfect combination of policy to create an absolutely insane market, and let's call that the party. We're in like the hangover now, right? And it was a crazy party, so you're going to be hungover for 3-4 days, right? And so you had basically the Trudeau government opening up the taps on temporary foreign workers and international students, and the Ford government's very much to blame in that as well, because they sort of exploited the public college loophole thing to get so the Ontario international student thing was just completely out of control. So you had record immigration, or record population growth, let's call it. You had the pandemic, our generation sort of coming of age and wanting to buy houses for the first time, and doing that outside of the 416, like going into and not just in Toronto, but all over the country. That urban exodus was happening.
Even like Calgary too was a popular area. Other parts of Canada.
Yeah. People were going there in search of affordability, right? It was like, if I don't have to work from an office, then I'm gonna go to Calgary. Halifax was a big one, right? People were going all over the place. So you had that, and then you had emergency interest rate, 0.25 overnight rate. So you had the cheapest debt that we'd ever seen in our lifetimes, I guess, other than the global financial crisis. And Canadian consumers are like, they can't be trusted with credit like that, man.
Saw that opportunity, like, I think I need a pool, right?
Yeah, it's time to lever up and bro down.
I'm going to get a pool.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to redo my whole backyard. I know it's pretty crazy because they saw it as but what happens ultimately, you're going to have to pay that one day, or it's going to get reassessed. And is that what we're seeing now? Are we seeing that 5-year sort of lock-in now come up as a reassessment, and people are going to lose their homes?
So, like, a lot of people are losing their homes. You're seeing a lot of power of sales. I think we've been running record power of sales, which is like basically the Canadian or the Ontario equivalent of foreclosure, for several months now. And it's like up 80% year over year, and 200 or 300% in the last 2 or 3 years. So yes, probably. And this is the problem with credit, right? And this is why this is going to be a longer term drag on Canada's economy is, when you take on debt, you're borrowing money from your future self with interest, right? Like, you still have to pay that back at some point. And most people are comfortable doing that because they think that their wage prospects are going to be better in the future, the economy is going to be stronger in the future, or whatever. But that has been the opposite of the case.
That's true,
right? The economy is far worse. Our wages have barely grown. They haven't outgrown inflation, or if so, barely. But the average person doesn't feel wealthier today than they did in 2020 or 2021. So now we have a record number of mortgages up for renewal in 2026. And that creates a problem, because people are going to be increasing their mortgages to, it's not massive. Like, it's like, I think 50% of mortgages are renewing at a higher rate. And the jumps are like, 20, 30%. But during that period of time, you also maybe got a new car, or all of your living expenses went up, and gas is more expensive. Everything in your life is more expensive. And so adding another cost to you, it means you have less money to actually go and contribute to consumption and whatever. We just saw that in the GDP print, like, consumption's way down. The only thing propping Canada's economy up right now is government spending.
That's right. And that's a problem.
It's a big issue. I mean, you see that during recessions, right? Like, the government basically said, and I think both Pierre and Carney were running on a platform that were running a super high deficit. I think they both they were saying, we both see a recession on the horizon. Why else would each of us be proposing deficits of this size? It's like, Harper did it in 08. It was necessary in the 90s as well.
You have to sort of reinvest in Canada in a way that
it's like make work projects, right? They would call it, like, you go look around at like all, like the brutalist, like, concrete architecture, like that was a make work project in 70s, I think, or the 80s. They basically said, the economy's toast. We're going to spend a bunch of government money on using Canadian concrete to build institutional buildings at universities and, downtowns and all that, like Robarts at U of T and all those like brutalist buildings. It's an example of a make work project. It happens every cycle. I think that's what the budget is telling us is, they're going to spend a ton of money. The problem is that the bond market sees that, and basically the government is taking control of the economy, and the Bank of Canada can't control inflation anymore, because if they're pumping so much money into the economy now, that's going to keep it pushed up. And the bond market's saying, yeah, rates are probably going to be rising by the end of next year.
So we don't foresee them continue to come down.
Oh, a little bit.
Here,
but
there.
I mean, Bank of Canada basically said they're done cutting. RBC called like 2 months ago that they would have been done cutting because inflation's kind of where they need it to be. If the government's pumping a ton of money into the economy, the problem is it's all at the expense of Canadian consumers.
That's
like,
the problem.
Yeah, because we're so indebted. I mean, it's partially our problem. Like we took on way too much debt, and so that's resulted in us being impacted by this. Like Ben Tao put out this thing: the Canadian consumers are like twice as affected by increases in interest rate compared to U.S. consumers because we have like twice as much debt, right? We have the highest household debt in the world. So that part is our responsibility and we should be accountable to that. But the government side is also a big piece of it.
So do you think, like, back to this, what we were saying is this considered a normal market? Where are we standing? Is it the worst it's ever been? Is this somewhat returning to what a normal market would look like?
So it depends on where you look at it. So like at a national level, from a volume perspective, it's pretty normal. From if we're talking the GTA, like specifically Toronto, 416 and 905, it's like one of the worst markets we've ever seen. If you're talking about the pre-construction market, it is unarguably the worst market.
Really?
Oh yeah, it's so bad. Like I think like 20 something condos sold last month. Like
and we're condos for sure, which we're going to talk about. Now, what do you think that is? Why do you think people are opting out to go new construction, or maybe if they are buying, they're just buying already pre-existing residential housing or whatever it may be?
Well, yeah. So the spread is probably the big thing. Like it was always like this, but like if you want to go buy a pre-con right now, you're spending $1,400 a square foot, and the resale market's $900.
Yeah,
right? And trending down, or $950 and trending down. So why would you do that? Well, I mean, in 2020, I would ask somebody the same question, which is why I was never a pre-con guy. But they would have answered, well, by the time I take possession of this unit, it's going to be worth the $1,400 a foot. But now nobody, like that's when the price curve is going up. Now the price curve is going down. So why would they feel that way?
You're not seeing that, are you?
No, so that's why nobody's buying it, right? Like really. So there's no trade to be found, and so builders are having a hard time moving these units. What we're seeing is builders pivoting to rental, which is where Canada's expediting our path into becoming a renter's economy.
So they're opting out of selling, and they're building the properties and then going into renting them rather.
So yeah, I guess to like fully explain this, They wouldn't build them. Like they would, when it's in the planning phase, they would change the project so you'd probably reconfigure the floor plans a little bit. You have to make some changes, and then you would go and apply for a program called CMHC MLI Select, which is basically insured by us, the taxpayer, and it allows people 50-year amortizations, 90+% loan to value, the lowest interest rate in the market if they build basically like ESG rental housing. So it has to be environmentally friendly, it has to have affordable housing, and it has to be accessible. And they get a certain amount of points, and the points determines how good their loan is, basically. So the best credit product in Canada is for corporations to build rental. So that's why they're starting to pivot where the numbers work. It doesn't work in a lot of markets, in especially in the GTA. But in like Alberta, I mean, it's massive amount of rental under construction. Alberta, BC, Atlantic Canada, like 14% of their existing rental stock is under construction right now. So we're going to see this huge surge of rental basically drop on the market over the next like 2 to 3 years across Canada, just not in the GTA.
Well, that's very interesting, man. So from the buyer and seller's perspective in this given market, how would you advise them to sort of travel and navigate through this?
I would just say be patient, and like people have been rewarded for being patient. I think again, it is very much a difference between like Ontario and the rest of the country, but I think you can afford to be patient in most markets right now. Prices aren't going up, interest rates aren't going up yet, right? If they'll probably be neutral, or if anything, if we see a recession, maybe a bit more downside. So I think people can afford to wait, and I would just really focus on getting the right deal, right? Like find a house that, regardless of what the economic outlook looks like, you actually want to buy it still. Like to me, that's
Oh yeah. I'm gonna ask about that. Dean's in the background saying, "Ask for Bill 60." Don't you worry, bro. We got a whole segment on that, bro. I want to talk about that 100%. So from a buyer's perspective, be patient, and I got to be honest with you. I got a condo right now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking from the seller's perspective. But before we go into the condos in general, from a seller's perspective, on the residential side, on the condo market side, should they just be holding out then? Is that the play? Because are they going to get top dollar for
a seller?
For a seller?
I mean, no, yeah, they're like the market's got some, like you're seeing some deals happening, which is nice. Like again, as prices are coming down, more people can afford to buy the houses, so they are buying the houses. You're not going to get like relative to what we've seen in the last 5 years, you're not going to get a great price for anything right now. Maybe like there's a couple of neighborhoods that have been like relatively unchanged because they're insulated, because they're wealthier areas or whatever. If you're a seller, it really depends on like to me, I think most people think too much about the market and less about like their personal circumstances. So
That's fair.
Qualitatively, like, or if you were to get the money and you have to realize a loss or whatever, but if you were to take that money out and put it into the S&P 500 index or anything else, right? Like, Enbridge stock, would you do better than you're doing right now? And for the answer for many people is yes, but you have to account for everything, right? It costs you 5% realtor fees to sell that, and lawyer and all of this stuff, and maybe mortgage break fee. The amount of times that I'll go and sit with someone and they're asking me that question and they've never actually pulled up a spreadsheet and like run the math on it, it's astounding. It's like 90+% of cases, right? So my advice to people is run the numbers, and the answer will probably become pretty clear on what you should do. But most people, we have this attachment, like this obsession with real estate in Canada because it's been such a great wealth building tool for the last 30 years. And people don't want to tell themselves that that's over, or they can't, right? It's hard to like rewire your brain from the past 30 years.
They want to get maximum dollar. Like my neighbor down the street got 1.4 for this house.
Yeah.
Why is mine only priced at 200,000 less?
Yeah. That's a huge part of it. But then another thing is like Canadians just don't want to try and figure out another way to make wealth, right? And housing's been so good at it.
Yeah, real estate's been a big part of that, and I think you're 100% right. People don't often take stock of their individual finances.
Yeah,
it's pretty, it's crazy, man. Like I got married recently in August, and you go through these marriage classes if you go to the church and stuff. Yeah. And one of the things they do is they challenge you and they ask, do you know your partner's finances and stuff?
Yeah.
And you'd be surprised how somebody who's getting married to a person doesn't even know what they make a year.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting, right? And that speaks to your point that that's where it starts, probably before you should maybe even be selling or investing. Maybe it should start within your own home. What is exactly going on with you? What's going on with your wife? How's your spending habits?
Yeah.
Like, what would be your thoughts and advice to people just on that?
I agree, man. I think Canadians I think we have a financial literacy crisis in this country, to be honest with you. And like that's reflected by a lot of the things that we just discussed, but also like our household indebtedness rate. Like we have the highest debt to household income in the world.
In the world?
In the world.
That's massive.
Yeah, it's bad, man. Wow. And that's a long-term drag on the economy. Like we're a debt-based economy, so we can't grow until we can take on more debt. It's like if you go to the bank and say, hey, I want a mortgage, and they're like, well, you've got this, you got your car loan and all of your credit cards are maxed and whatever. Like our economy is in that position. So they're not going to give us more credit to grow.
Why is that though? So like, what do we do? Are we not economically intelligent?
Yeah, I think we have a financial literacy issue. Honestly, like I think Canadians, we are very status-driven people. We've become very consumeristic, and our economy is basically run by a banking oligopoly that exists to sell you credit at any point. It's like I have buddies who are in the used car space, and they make more money selling car loans than cars, right? So, and you go to Canadian Tire, and they're trying to give you a credit card, Home Depot credit card, everybody, right? Is it credit?
It's true,
right?
Yeah.
Everything is credit. Everybody's driving a new late model imported vehicle, and you go to the US, like it's not like that. And you could say, oh well, yeah, their climate's better and the cars don't rust or whatever, maybe, right? Okay, so that gives an extra 5 years, but the amount of new cars on the road in Canada versus the US, the size of the house that the average person is living in Canada versus the US, the size of our mortgage payment relative to our income, etc. We're just that's the way our economy was built, and we all played into it.
Yeah, that's completely unfortunate, and you're so right. And maybe that the approach that is some financial literacy courses in our schooling, or maybe something along those lines to help the young consumer and the young investor and the young individual taxpayer to maybe make more financially intelligent decisions.
I would love to see that, honestly. I think it's something we need.
Do you know, like, do we have anything even remotely close to that?
That's the crazy part, right? Like, you learn about like geography or like, I don't know, like civics, history, whatever, but they don't teach you about like literally the most important thing for most people's lives.
Literally.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to the greater point of why people are just like they don't even know their own finances. They don't know their monthly costs and stuff like that. I attribute that a lot to my dad. He was European, like Italian father, right? So they're very strict on finances. And
for sure.
Every time you start the car, it's $10. You know, that type of mentality. So it served well. But let's ask you. I got to ask you about the condo market, man. I got one myself, so I got some personal questions on this. What is exactly happening for people that maybe don't understand? Like, is it the worst it's ever been, the condo market?
Pre-con condos is the worst it's ever been. Yeah. Okay. So like, there's no bid for pre-cons, but the challenge with that. So yeah, like, let's go all the way to the beginning. Sure. So, in like 2017, you saw this thing that was basically called the non-resident speculation tax, and what happened was a lot of foreign money from that was buying resale. Like, I don't know if you remember, like Aurora, Newmarket, saw like Oakville, all those like luxury markets saw like 40% increases or 30% increases in price in like 2016. So what happened was, 2016, Vancouver put in a tax for their foreign buyers, and then all that capital moved to the GTA and started buying luxury properties.
Oh, okay. So that's how the shift happened, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of like, even I think Chinese real estate investors were coming in and investing in these multiple condos and just putting tenants in there. Yeah.
Yeah. So before that, they were buying luxury detached houses in the GTA in the 905, and then once the non-resident speculation tax came in, they pivoted. They still wanted to get capital out of China because capital controls were coming into China, and so you saw this huge shift. Like, as of 2017, condos were like trading maybe 5-10% above your resale market. And then all that foreign capital started to pile in, and there was a ton of excess demand. And they were basically saying, we're going to buy these because we were just going to sit on it, and we'll basically assign the paper, deal with it in 4 or 5 years when it's built. It was a better way for them to park money in Canadian real estate. And that started to inflate prices a little bit. So heading into like 18-19, Toronto condo market was getting pretty strong. Pre-con market was getting strong. You were trading maybe 10-15% over the resale market for pre-con condos. COVID happened. There was a huge excess demand. Everybody was buying and investing in real estate. And then everyone was a speculator, right? Everybody saw prices go up 10-20%. And they all started to pile into that. And once there was no houses to buy in the GTA, you were getting outbid on stuff. They're like, okay, well, if I still want exposure to real estate, I'll go buy a pre-con. So now, 2020, 2021, your pre-con condos are launching at like $1,400 a foot, $1,500 a foot. The resale market's still at like, I think it peaked at like $1,050 in 2021. Okay, so so if you're going to buy a pre-con condo, you're paying a 20-30% premium over the market. Like, any economic sense would tell you, during that period of time, like, it would have been the better trade to buy the resale unit and rent it out. Even if it was cash flow negative, you own it sooner, you're starting to amortize a mortgage, you're actually getting a return on your money. So it's sorted for people who are making less responsible financial decisions. And now that the chickens are coming home to roost, right? Like, it's not to say that they weren't wealthy or that they couldn't afford it or whatever. It just wasn't. It was never the better trade. So it's sorted for your less educated investors, or like less experienced, or less the ones who didn't run the numbers.
They saw the dollar signs.
Yeah. There's a more speculation. So now all of those projects are coming to completion, and they're not worth, like in the resale market, they're worth, I don't know, $950, $1,000, even $1,100, right? You're still losing $300 a foot. And so a lot of buyers don't want to show up on closing. So you have about 22% failure rate on closings right now. So if
people are just pulling out, essentially.
Yeah, they just basically say, I can't close. You can keep my deposit. If you want to sue me, go for it. Like, and some builders are suing and some aren't. You can check Canley, the Ontario courts system. It's all public. You can see what builders are suing people and which ones aren't.
Wow. Okay.
But you'll usually know before you close. Like, if you say, hey, I'm not going to close, they'll tell you typically if they're going to sue you or not. Like, they're not, I mean, it's just business, right? At that point. So there's that piece. And then, so there's that. And then there's all of that supply also where the people are closing, coming on the market, and most of them aren't selling at a loss. So they're renting it out. So you have this huge flood of rental supply coming on the market. We have record purpose-built rental housing under construction right now in the GTA. So that's been pushing rents down. So you have all of these factors, like the same way we had all of these factors pushing it up during COVID, you have all these factors pushing it down in present day. And it's bad, man. People are realizing losses. Condo values, I mean, they were trending down pretty quickly. They're slowing in how quickly they're trending down.
Okay.
They're still moving down, but I think you're getting to the point where, like, to me, the bottom of any market is when the most likely buyer for your property can actually afford to buy your property. So if that's a studio, that's probably a 1-person unit. So like I don't think a couple can live comfortably in these 300 square foot studios. So what can your median household income or median individual income in Toronto is like $75K. They can afford whatever 4.5, 5x income. So that those units are maybe worth $350, right? That's when you start to approach the bottom, when they can afford to buy those. A 1-bedroom, maybe you get a couple. So now you're pushing to 100K income, and now you're maybe 400 or 500K value. But we're approaching that, and you're starting to see buyers who can afford to buy this stuff actually come off the sidelines and buy where they can afford to.
Right. And the condo market specifically is, I guess, more achievable right now.
It's the entry level product. Like, it's back to the only people who are buying, like the investor bid is gone. Investors are piling into those CMHC MLI Select projects that I've mentioned to you.
Right.
Or they're gone because they're, hemorrhaging cash on the pre-cons that they bought or lost all their equity and don't want to touch the asset class again. So the people who are buying, your marginal buyer right now is people who need a home, like actual homeowners. So it's first-time buyers buying condos, and people who are selling them to them are people who are stepping up into a townhouse or a detached or moving to the 905.
And I've also seen, speaking on the pre-construction front, are they also closing projects? Like, some condo buildings are being built and they're just saying they're closing it. They're pulling the plug and they're closing the project.
So they wouldn't do that if it was under construction. So typically, like, you won't put a shovel in the ground until you've pre-sold 70% of your units.
Right.
You're seeing projects try and launch and cancel. Like, even some of the biggest builders in the country, like Mattamy as an example, they had a project where their land cost basis would have been really low because they were partnered with Quadrille, which is like a pension fund basically, on one of the malls. And they were launching a site at $1,200 a foot, I think. So, like, I don't know, it's a little bit expensive based on what we're seeing. And then they had really cool incentives. Like, you could basically pay your deposit over like an entire 2 years or something, like on a monthly payment. And they still couldn't sell enough units to hit their pre-construction financing target. So you have to typically hit 70% of your units sold before a bank will give you a loan to build that building.
Right.
And so they basically said, we're packing it in. We're not going to try run a sales program on this anymore. We're, shelving the project. And you've seen the same thing with a lot of projects. I think 18 have been canceled so far this year. So a lot of failed launches. And then you've seen the other pieces, like the launches that are successful was like, I think Center Court did one out in Pickering. It was like $1,100 a foot. So you're seeing the price curve trend down. Green Park did one in Lakeview Village at like $875 a foot parking in, and they managed to sell like, I don't know if it was like 60 to 100 units kind of range, but still not enough. So
you need that 70% mark. Maybe.
Yeah. So smaller projects where maybe they're building out of wood, they can keep the costs lower and they have fewer units to sell. They might be viable. We're seeing a lot of like the only thing that I'm actually seeing people like working in Toronto right now is basically buying. I don't know if you saw, like, the downtown got upzoned to 6+1 units. So you can like buy a 50-foot lot, sever it into 2, build 6 units on either side, plus a garden suite on either side. So that's like 14 units. Right?
Yeah, that's actually cool.
Those are working, and you can do that with CMHC MLI Select. So that stuff, that's probably the only investment strategy that actually works in the current economic setup.
So if an investor, just last year on condos, before I ask my personal question, but would now be, if somebody wanted to, I guess, get into the market, it'd be a good opportunity to purchase a condo as an entry level to just kind of get your foot in the door kind of thing?
I mean, I try to never advise people on timing, right? Like, to me, it's like when the timing is right, it's right. So to me, it's always a good time to do a good deal. It's always a bad time to do a bad deal. Fair. If you can get a great price on a unit, and if you're doing it as an investor and it's cash flowing and it hits the yield targets that you wanted, and it's doing a better job at getting you a return than putting the money into S&P 500 or whatever, sure. If you're a first-time buyer who is paying rent right now and you've run the numbers that it's, if you get rid of the opportunity cost of rent, which is, 100%, and you start paying that rent to yourself, and even though you're paying a little bit more monthly because you have condo fees now and interest and whatever, but it's allowing you to save that money and accumulate and pay down principal on your property and get access to a tax-free capital gains asset. Sure, yeah, like those there are instances in which it makes sense. I just think it's different for everybody, so it's hard for me to say from a timing perspective. Fair. Like, if I were to purely say timing, like if somebody wants the best price, I would say you're probably still gonna have to wait a bit, but you can still go and negotiate the best price. Like, just because the market's gonna fall another 5 or 10% doesn't mean I can't go and if I see a condo that I love and I think it's priced at market value and I go offer 10% below and I negotiate really hard and I get it, then I bought it at the future value anyway.
So if I got mine in 2016, it's an investment property, straight investment property. I have a tenant in there that's covering and some, so it's in the green for sure. But I'm at the point now where I want to shift over and purchase something else.
Yeah.
Would it be should I hold on it or should I, like, it is cash flowing, but I do want to get rid of it though.
Right.
Sure.
Personally, like, for personal reasons. I don't know.
I've had
that. It sounds like you answered the question.
Yeah, I guess so. But the thing is, I've had a tremendous amount of showings.
Yeah.
But no bites yet.
Yeah, I mean, price might be high. There's a tenant in it.
There is.
Yeah, it's always harder to sell a unit tenanted, right? Like, because the buyer now has to assume the risk of evicting that tenant prior to closing, and the closing could be up in the air, and if they give notice to their landlord before they move in, and blah blah blah. So qualitatively, that's difficult. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, price is like, I'm of the opinion like all agents can do the same things from a marketing perspective. So price is really your only marketing tool as a seller, right? Your agent can do lots, but they're not like the price is really your
price is really what.
So yeah, like if it's not selling, if you haven't got an offer yet, then something's probably wrong. If you reduce the price, maybe you get an offer, right?
I did, yeah. I reduced it once. That 550, 611 square foot, 105 square foot balcony. It's 2 full bathrooms,
right?
And 1 bedroom plus den. Jane and Highway 7,
right?
So Woodbridge area, but I don't want to go lower than.
Yeah, and everybody has that number, right? Like I think most sellers, like a lot of sellers have equity padding, and so some of them have a number in their head, and they say, look, like, and that's the thing for you, right? Like you've said, okay, well, after this certain number, it's not worth it for me to sell anymore.
It's true.
So you've already run the numbers in your head, right?
Yeah, which I definitely have. Definitely spent the time on. Do you predict it now? Just talking about 2026 on condo and residential, and just in general with the market. Do you predict it getting worse, or like because a lot of things are set to happen. Like we talked about people losing their homes, reassessing their mortgage. What do you foresee 2026 looking like?
I can't see it getting better. I mean, my expectation would be that, like, with the current set of circumstances that we have, it will likely get worse. Not at an alarming rate, but it'll, like, we've been grinding down at about like 5-10% a year for the last couple of years. We saw a huge drop in 2022, and then just basically been grinding down since then. I think it'll continue to do that. I don't think the bottom's going to fall out. Like, you know, there's nothing that could happen economically that would make that, unless like the Kuzma renegotiation comes up with the U.S. next year and they basically say, like, we're not trading with you anymore unless you like become the 51st state. Like that would probably be like a bottom falling out moment, maybe. But that's not that's
pretty far,
tiny chance in the range of potential outcomes. So I think, like, from what I can see, prices will continue to grind down. You'll see sellers keep seeing distress. They'll keep putting distressed sales up in the market. You'll start seeing buyers creep back in, but buyers they don't have a sense of urgency because they've seen prices going down. Like if you go to the grocery store and you're going to get, I don't know, whatever, just your groceries, get some steaks, and you walk by a TV because it's Walmart and you see the TV is like $1,000 and you're like, oh, that's a nice TV. I kind of need a new TV for the office or whatever. And then you don't buy it. And then next week you go in and you see it, they walk by the same TV and it's $900 and you're like, whoa, okay, cool. But then you don't buy it again. And then it's $800. And now you've made the decision. Okay, well, why would I buy that TV if every time I come back to the grocery store, it's $100 cheaper? And eventually it gets to the point where now it's $500 and it's 50% off the original price. And you're like, shit, okay, I got to go buy the TV. Right?
Yeah.
I finally got to do it. That we're not at that point yet. So buyers they see that they're being rewarded for patience. They see this is the problem with deflation. And this is why economists are so afraid of deflation, is because it begets more deflation. If people see prices falling, they don't rush out to buy things because they wait for prices to get cheaper. And that's what we're seeing in the housing market right now.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, man. I think 2026 might be a little bit more tasty if the buyer is a little bit patient. Like I'm looking at houses, and I think that 2026 might be a good opportunity
for sure
for a lot of people. Let's talk about it, like a little bit of politics now. I want to kind of swing that in here. A couple weeks ago, the budget passed.
Yeah,
I want to kind of get your opinion on the two parts of it. There was some housing in there. Maybe grapple with that a little bit with you, and then also just overall assessment. What did you think of it?
I mean, I think they played it like it was smart the way they put it out. Like everyone thought it was going to be $100 billion, came in at 70, so they kind of like gamed the yield curve a little bit. Now they have room if they end up spending 80 or 90. You know, they still have some, like, I mean, they're politicians. They know what they're doing.
Exactly. Exactly right.
So some of the stuff was interesting, to be honest with you. Like, I try and set politics aside. I think that, like, I think that just before we get into it, like, I am of the opinion that we actually have like the perfect democratic system in like a free market economy, and that consumers communicate like perfectly what their political intentions are through the way that they spend money.
Interesting.
Right?
Okay.
And so I honestly think that like most of like the red versus blue stuff is very theatrical, and I actually think it's a system basically designed to divide us. You get like red versus blue, or liberal versus conservative, because it makes it easier to sort us into groups to win votes so that they can win the election, but also because it has us like fighting this ideological or like class war rather than staging a revolution, realizing that there's this huge allocation of wealth getting pushed up and we're all being left out.
That's
my opinion on politics, just before we start. So I'm very much like a student of the economy rather than politics, but I pay a lot of attention to politics and the way that it interacts with the economy. So the budget, a couple of things interested me. The one thing that interested me the most was probably the super deduction. Did you see that?
No.
So basically, like they, I think it was more to try and pull business investment from the U.S. Basically, if a business buys, there's a couple of different categories, but like vehicles, property, plant, and equipment, etc., they can depreciate it 100% in year one. So like literally, you get this, I can't remember what it's called, but something super deduction. And so the idea is the ROI on it doesn't actually make that much more sense. Like it's maybe a 10% improvement from a typical depreciation, but like I think for small businesses, like if I'm like a plumber and it's like, damn, I can go out and get a bunch of vans and run that off on my books immediately, I could see that being impactful, right? Because they're not going to run that 10% IRR over a 10-year period. So that was interesting. Housing, housing is not really a federal issue, so I didn't really have high expectations for them to do anything. They're putting more money into CMHC, MLI Select. I think they're putting more money into ACLP, which is where the government lends directly to developers. They're doing some social housing, like that 40,000 units at Downsview.
I thought they were saying something about building 60,000 houses, or was it 40?
So like the whole Build Canada initiative, I think is like, I think it's like 60 over the entire period, but I think the first project is like 40,000.
And are those modular homes? What are they
doing? Idea is for them to be modular. Like they want to be innovative in construction. I'm not ambitious that that's going to have a huge impact unless they like fully hand it to the private sector, which maybe like based on the numbers that I could calculate, it looked like they were only contributing like $30,000 per house. So maybe they are giving it to the private sector and basically financing the rest.
Then that's where I'm worried. Like, and I could be wrong. This is my total interpretation of it. I'm thinking, okay, they're building 60,000 modular homes. These are tiny homes that the government's going to own, and then the individual, the taxpayer, the Canadian citizen is going to rent from the government. Isn't that just a bureaucracy of the government?
I mean, it's like it's social, socialism basically, right? Like like you see this in many countries. Like, so we don't have a social housing program in Canada. In the U.S., they have like something called Section 8, where basically the government will give you a voucher and you can rent off of like a typical landlord. But we don't really have any system like that in Canada. Not at a federal, provincial. I guess it is a little bit at a provincial and municipal level. Like they have rent geared to income programs, et cetera. But the wait lists are like 100 years long. So do we need more social housing? We wouldn't need more social housing if we were better at building market housing, but we're not, right? We have it's all wrapped in red tape and it's a broken system. So yeah, to answer your question, it's basically like a socialist housing system similar to like the USSR or whatever when they were delivering. I mean, China's like that. Singapore, they basically give everybody a condo, whatever.
Yeah, that's where I'm a little bit challenged with it. That's where I'm like a little bit, the middle class taxpayer, and the developments don't seem to be increasing, and there seems to be that bureaucracy stays there, which I want to ask you about. But yeah, it's very unfortunate that I'll wait some of these things sort of play out. But how much do you think politics, and I know you've articulated beautifully on your stance on politics, and I really appreciate that. I think that's totally fair. How much do you think politics plays into just the housing market and just what it is that we're doing? Is it almost like a necessary evil? Should people be engaged?
Well, the way that it plays in is that it gets in the way, right? So, for me, a more perfect version of democracy, in my view, based on what I've described around the economy, is the less friction that you can add to the economy, the better. And housing is the area of the economy where we have the most friction, right? If you look at products that are taxed the heaviest in Canada, it's basically like alcohol, cigarettes, gasoline, housing, right? So we tax things when we don't want people to use or create those things. why are we taxing housing like alcohol and cigarettes when we have a housing crisis? So the federal government just within the budget, they reduced the HST. Doug Ford followed suit and reduced provincial taxes. So now if you're a first-time home buyer, you can get $130,000 subsidy, basically, by comparison to a second home buyer to buy a brand new house. So they're trying to stimulate construction of new houses by making your marginal buyer more powerful for that house. So this is a good thing. Anywhere we're removing taxes in the supply chain, something that's necessary, like a necessary, a human need, is a good thing. There's that. Then the next layer is your municipal governments, and they're the gatekeepers. They're the ones who approve projects, entitle projects, and they also have the last layer of taxes, and they still have something called development charges. So when you used to buy a new house, 31% of the value of that house was tax. Okay, HST and land transfer tax and property taxes, development charges. Now we're down to about 20% because HST is gone, PST is gone. You still have development charges. So you're starting to see Mississauga drop development charges by 50%. And that was where that project that I mentioned was able to launch at $875 a foot. So that will allow builders to launch units at lower prices where buyers can actually afford them. So when I think about the way that the government interacts with housing is, for the last 30 years, they've increased their role as being a friction source in housing because they saw it as basically a golden goose, and they could just keep extracting tax revenue from it. And now it's stopped being that way because interest rates aren't trending down for the last 30 years and the consumer's tapped out and the economy's broken. And so they have to take a step back and say, okay, we got to get out of the way here and stop trying to get those eggs from the golden goose. And municipalities last on deck. Like if Toronto doesn't get rid of the development charges, all the builder money is just going to leave the city, and the 905 is going to build up because they're all cutting their development charges.
Yeah, so it's a great point. It's a multi-level issue. It's not just the federal government kind of just incentivize the municipalities and provincial government to produce charges and these supplemental fees. And one of the other critiques in how politics kind of plays to housing is the bureaucracy and the red tape, like you mentioned, the regulations, the zoning. How much is that? How that plays into the sort of impeding of developments?
It does and it doesn't. So it plays in a lot in such that in the last 10 years, only really large projects would succeed. It was too much capital risk for the small, like you or me, to go and build 6 units, right? Now in the city of Toronto, at least, there's no development charges on 6+1 units, and they're as of right zoning. So I don't have to go hire a planner. I would hire an architect, but now we have pre-made designs. I don't pay development charges. So that's a viable project for a startup real estate developer, or a lot of guys in construction are getting into this stuff. Some of the most common partnership I'll see is a realtor and a contractor, or a lawyer and a contractor, and they're crushing it, absolutely crushing it with this stuff. So right now, that's a very good example of the only housing that's getting built in a meaningful way right now is multiplexes, and it's done because all of those limitations are removed.
Yeah.
Before, basically, the reason we see so much high rise or large sprawling subdivisions is because you had to be doing thousands of units at a time or hundreds of units at a time to make it worth your while to deal with the headache of the municipality and to pay the fees associated with it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy on how much that goes into, but it's good to see that it's re-stimulated and that they're relieving.
So necessity is the mother of invention. They need tax revenue, they need affordable housing. If they don't, the RCMP put out a report basically saying that Canadians are going to revolt when they realize how broke they are, right? I honestly think that this is pretty life or death for politicians, at least in their political careers, to solve this problem. Otherwise, they're never. I'm surprised that the Liberals won the last election, but young people didn't show up to vote, right? But in the city of Toronto, is Chow going to win the next election? Probably not, given they shouldn't solve a single problem in the last couple of years other than renaming some stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's a great point. Raise taxes quite a bit too. There's been quite a bit of difficulties in the city of Toronto, but the province has moved and edged forward a little bit with Bill 60, which I want to ask you about now. This is kind of breaking the headlines right now. A lot of interest online. A lot of people criticizing it, saying it moves more onus and or power rather to the landlord, but it's also So we're making it a little bit more fair for, I think, both ends, and it's changing some regulations and some zoning. So if you could just explain to everybody, what exactly is Bill 60? What's happening there?
Sure, yeah. So Bill 60 basically, the largest impacts is basically that it shortens the timelines and changes some of the requirements for landlords and tenants to fight one another at court. And so landlords now can submit if a tenant's 7 days late on rent rather than 15 days. So that shortens that timeline by 7 days. That's not going to change the...
It's not significant, yeah.
Well, it's just not... 7 days doesn't mean much when you're still waiting 6 to 12 months for a...
So has
that
that not been amended? Because we hear these stories all the time, Dan, where a landlord, which oftentimes is just a regular middle class, probably a new couple that owns a condo because they've invested all their money, incurred all the risk, and they're really held hostage by a tenant that's maybe taking advantage of the weakness of the system. Does that change at all now?
It should, based on some other rules. So there's that one. They're going to be hiring more sheriffs. So right now there's like a 16-week wait for a sheriff. So once you even get a ruling, you still have to wait several months just to get someone to enforce it. Assuming the tenant doesn't move out when you actually have the eviction ruling. And then you have the tenants now have to pay. So if a tenant's being evicted for being late on rent, they have to actually pay 50% of the renting owed, or so the rent owed, if they want to try and appeal that ruling. So that's an interesting one.
That is interesting
because they're basically forcing landlords and tenants to split the risk. Like as it stands right now, if I'm a landlord and the tenant's not paying me rent for 8 months, and then I go to court, and I'm assuming 100% of the risk, right? Because I'm the one paying the mortgage or whatever. And
100%, yeah.
I don't empathize for people who understood the risks and got into stuff, but the risks have changed, right? Like when you started investing, maybe it took 3 months to get a ruling. Now it's 8 or 12 or whatever. I know because people have had years.
Yeah, years, and they're paying the mortgage. Somebody's holding their property hostage. It's quite unfair, though, to be completely that's unfair for
that part's unfair for sure. So you're allowing theft to take place.
Exactly,
and so the idea there is, I think that'll constrict a lot of the appeals that are happening, or limit the number of appeals that are happening. And basically, if tenants aren't paying rent, then they can either make right on the rent and have their appeal heard, or the assumption is if they're not going to make that 50% payment because it's not even 100% of the rent, then they aren't actually committing to pay the rent, and they'll have to leave, or they wouldn't have a right to appeal. That should shrink the number of cases and eventually get the backlog down. But as it stands right now, we have like a 50,000 case backlog. It's the highest it's ever been. And that's after doubling the number of adjudicators, or like judges in the system. So hiring hasn't solved the problem. So they're playing with a different part of the system now. Does it shift things in favor of landlords? Yeah, for sure. Did we need that? I would say probably. I think that there's still a lot of room for abuse on both sides that I think people are concerned about. I guess we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's one of those, isn't it? So significant changes, but I guess in a way, because of the backlog and stuff, it's not really.
I don't think it'll have like a massive impact within the next, like it'll take years for the impact to be felt. I think other than in the actual court backlog for landlords and tenants actually conducting something immediately, like they'll feel it right away because it's 7 days faster or whatever.
That's true. Yeah.
The other thing that Ford did was they just stepped in and took over like the real estate regulator. I don't know if you heard that.
Yeah. Was that under that same bill?
No, it was different. Basically, as of tomorrow, or December 1st. So they're taking over RECO, the Real Estate Council of Ontario, because
so the government's going to be in charge of that
for now. Yeah, I don't know until they figure out. So basically, they did the same thing with FSRA back in the day with the mortgage industry. Basically, the regulator was misbehaving. $8 million worth of trust fund accounts disappeared from a brokerage called iPro, which is like one of the largest brokerages in the GTA, and it was just all regulatory oversight. They handled it very poorly, and the Ontario government's basically taking it over.
So what do you think that's going to look like? How's that going to change things?
I don't know. I mean, more bureaucratic. Like, yeah.
Anytime you have government intervention, that's the problem, isn't it?
Yes and no. Like, the challenge is that, Milton Friedman talks about how like the government has like 3 roles, and one of those primary roles that the government has is the enforcement of contracts, right? And the real estate industry really is an industry that is built around contracts and the enforcement of those contracts. And so, if there's one place where I think it's like reasonable to expect the government to step in, is to make sure that, like, I think that's what they're doing here.
Yeah.
I hate bureaucracy to no end. Like, there are few people who hate bureaucracy as much as I do.
Right.
But it would fall within the scope of what I think is sort of necessary for a government to do. And the industry failed to regulate, and $8 million worth of damages were incurred. So
yeah, that's totally fair, right? There's some real just there if you think about it. And another thing that's a hot topic that's happening right now, which I don't think a lot of Canadians actually understand, is that in British Columbia, the Cowichan tribe has successfully won land claims lawsuits in the Supreme Court of British Columbia. And I think as a result, it has created a ripple effect across Canada where now these land claims seem to be occurring. Can you explain to everybody exactly what's happening there?
Yeah, so basically in BC, the Cowichan Band, they successfully won a land claim case that's now escalating into further courts. But basically it would state that their title, like their ownership of the land, would override the Crown's title and ownership of the land. In BC, it's a little different because like 95% of BC is like unceded, which means that there's no treaties. So what would happen in that case? Like, we don't know, right? It's a brand new thing, but what, like, hypothetically, the way that it would work is they're not trying to like evict people from their houses or anything like that. They made it pretty clear that that's not their intention. We saw this happen in Saugeen or Sauble Beach, right? Like the Sauble Beach, they took the beach back, and there was even some private property that was taken back there, and they've renamed the beach Saugeen Beach.
When was this?
Last summer. I go there every summer, and I just saw the sign change. Yeah, so it would be like,
so it's not called Sauble Beach anymore.
No, yeah, it says Saugeen Beach on the sign.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. This is an ongoing thing. I'm just learning about it because like it just started touching my world, and but in BC, I think if you play the tape to the end, the idea is that rather than a municipal government collecting your taxes and delivering your services and all of that stuff, it would actually be the First Nations that have the ultimate tenure of the land, and now you're paying your property tax and whatever to them. But what they actually want in most cases is actually just they'll say, oh well, we've actually owned it since this date, and we'll come up with a new deal with you if you back pay us all the taxes for that period of time, and maybe give us a little bit, because like there's one of these happening in Ontario. There's a big court case happening next year from one that started in like the 90s for the Haldeman Tract, it's called.
Okay.
So in Ontario, there's the Six Nations, and they actually have, from what I've heard from people I've spoken to in the Six Nations, they've said that they've run out of space basically, and they do actually want a little bit more land. Not they don't want the whole Haldeman Tract, but they want some more land out of it. But then they also want a settlement, like they want financial reparations for basically back taxes, I guess, is like what they're saying. Like, hey, you've been collecting property tax, you've been charging people a subscription fee to live on our land.
So they want retro pay.
Yeah. So there's that. So I mean, man, it's a crazy thing that's happening. And what I've learned is I have a guy coming on my YouTube channel in the next couple of weeks about this, but he's a law professor at Queen's, and been talking about this. Like, this is the whole, I guess it's called a UN drip. I don't know if you've read about this. Yeah. So it's like this thing with the UN where basically they're trying to give back a lot of the land. I guess like what I've learned from this process, which is interesting in regards to land acknowledgements, is that one of the reasons why the governments are doing these land acknowledgements at all of like the government buildings and all of those things is because they actually are trying to set a precedent saying, hey, like we're on this and we're accepting that it's treaty land, not that it's yours, right? Like, so the land acknowledgement is actually protecting. It's not like taking them on. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that I've learned about this in the last little bit. I'll admit I'm not like nearly as educated as I want on it, but from what I've seen so far, it's a fascinating world. And
I just wonder how this plays out. Like, you've enlightened me on a little bit of it. So they just basically, it seems there's a financial gain that
in most cases
they want.
Yeah.
It's not actual like, okay, get out of your homes. This is our home now kind of thing. That's not what's happening.
Seems like it, but it's funny. Like, I mean, to play the devil's advocate, because like, again, like I just like, I try and avoid the politics of all this stuff. I think people politicize stuff. Yeah. Well, people just politicize stuff, and it's like so annoying, right? Like they're just trying to make a fight out of everything. It's like, yeah, it is for sure. Yeah. But I just think like if you're doing that, you're playing their game, right? Like they've won, right? The politicians have won. If you're fighting each other over what color your party is and all that stuff, like, we're Canadians. We got to come together and agree on stuff and like and create consensus outside of the things that they tell us are our values, So in regards to this stuff, there's an example in BC where there was this, I think it's called the Sekama or something like that, Sekawa lands in BC where they've just built this beautiful, massive purpose-built rental project. Okay. Then there's another one in Enoch, I think in Edmonton. Like, so there's instances where that one in in Vancouver, it's like the nicest project in the city. And so it's like, what if, hypothetically, right? Like we have one of the big reasons why property values are where they are in the GTA is because our land use planning is a mess. So we basically, they've made it impossible, all of that bureaucracy, to develop land effectively.
Right.
What if we gave them the land back and then they did what they did in BC and said, hey, just do whatever, we're just going to build a massive tower because we make our own rules and screw you, right? And we're not going to pay taxes so we can make it cheaper. We're not going to collect development charges and we're not going to collect property taxes and whatever. I mean, that to me is where this could potentially have the most meaningful impact on the real estate market. The other thing that I think that you'll see, and you're starting to see this with Cowichan, and I think you'll see this with the Hall Demand Tract, is it becomes a bit of a, I think it'll be a political hot potato next year if it goes into court the way that like you're going to hear. It's going to be the same media coverage. This is like 950,000 acres. It has like Kitchener-Waterloo is in it, like Brantford, I don't know, like a bunch of cities, right? If that happens, people are going to rethink buying properties in those areas until that's resolved, right?
Yes.
And that's what's happening in Cowichan, right?
And that's what I was going to ask you next is like, as the Canadian homeowner, number one, should you be concerned? And number two, when you're purchasing a home, is this going to be included in like the bill of sale? Like,
I think it's going to start being that way.
Yeah, like heads up, we're not liable if a land claim becomes successful in this given area where you're buying this property.
Yeah, basically, I think they'll make a buyer do an acknowledgement that there is a land claim in that area. Like we're working on a tool right now with Valerie that basically aggregates all of that information so that you can just search by address and just see whether or not a property has a land claim on it or not. There's not a ton of them. Like, you know, they're all listed on the Ontario website. But if I'm a buyer, I would want to know that. So, and,
for sure.
And then I think you'll start seeing agents basically putting in whether or not the seller represents whether it is or isn't. And this is just like a new layer of research that our profession has to do. It's strange, and it's also weird that it ended up on the real estate industry, but
yeah,
it's property rights. So
yeah, well, yeah, definitely. It's very interesting to see how this world of politics and real estate sort of meets. I got one more question for you. Just turning to the United States, I'm very interested to ask you this. I don't know if you've seen what's been happening in New York City with Mom Daniel and stuff like that. Have you been following it at all? How do you think that sort of plays out for New York?
I don't know. I mean, like the last time that New York like descended into this like criminal wasteland, like it's happened many times over history, right? Not to say that that's the direction it's going, but like I could, socialism from my perspective doesn't work exceptionally well. I think we have myriad instances over history to substantiate that.
For sure.
We could see a big capital migration out, which, you might see a lot of people basically move to Florida, to move to Miami, and they'll still go to New York to do business and whatever, but they won't be like a economic resident there because of all of these changes and potential like threats on tax, capital, etc. Like capital will go where it's respected, but to go back, like the last time you saw these cycles, like you had like the epic eras of like gangs of New York. You had like the 70s, like with like the Clash. Like there's a lot of really cool times in New York's history that had like these burning down points. And I think Canada is very much in that position too. Like
I would agree.
We're really like broken right now, but that like it's from that like, man, things have been so amazing here. Like we resorted to like identity politics to create like this like oppression Olympics of like who's suffering more because things were so good here, right? Like
right.
And it's like we have to invent reasons why like stuff's hard, and now it's actually hard because we're suffering economically. And I think New York's probably going to go through some similar thing, and it is, and that's why they had that outcome.
That's why he succeeded as well as he did. I think that the people he was going against weren't exactly formidable to be successful. That was a part of it too.
Yeah, well, I mean, Como probably could have won it if it wasn't for what's the other guy with the beret.
Yeah, it was the bald guy. Yeah. Do you remember his name, Dean? I forget, but yeah, I know exactly.
But he just hated Como so much that he was willing to throw the whole election, man.
Yeah, he kind of but I read some data that even if he did pull out, like he wouldn't.
It would have been close.
It would have been closer for sure. It would have been very close. Yeah, but he probably would have still edged over. But
yeah, see, this is where it's interesting though. Like when you think about that, to me, like this is what fascinates me about Canada is like in the U.S. They're like let's say 30, 40 plus is right wing and their youth is left wing. In Canada, it's the opposite. And that to me is very fascinating.
That's relatively new though, for sure. Right? Like most of the time you would see young folks voting liberal all the time, right? Yeah. But we've seen that shift a bit.
Well, they sold us out.
Yeah.
Like, they literally sold us out to make a cushy retirement for the boomers because they're worried that the pension system won't be able to support them. Functionally, that's like literally it. Like that's the I think is the what they just designed. And so young people are pissed off with the results of the policies that they voted for, and now they've switched teams. Like, but it's interesting to me that like that's the biggest reflection that I see is like you can see the future of a country in their youth voters.
That's
and
right.
the U.S., it looks more like a left-leaning youth than in Canada, which is interesting to me.
Yeah, that's a great point. I wonder how it plays out, because I think Joe Biden, just lastly on here, well, before we tie a bow on, I think Joe Biden played a big role into why Trump got such a mandate, right?
Yeah.
If Trump would have won that election, you maybe wouldn't have seen that much of a mandate in support for his party in the most recent election.
Well, the Democrats did that to themselves. I mean, they could have run Tulsi Gabbard, they could have run RFK, right? But they ran an establishment candidate that they did control, and they handed him the election. I mean, and then look, like Tulsi and RFK are both on his team now. So, and they only have themselves to blame in that regard. And they did the same thing with Hillary the first time.
Yeah, you're exactly right. They've made that mistake multiple times. I wonder how that plays into Canadian politics, because I look at it like I was convinced that after 10 years that this recent election, like conservative, you got to put the accountability on Pierre too. He did lose like a 20-point plus lead. That's pretty intense. So a little bit of accountability there too. But I think with them winning again now, the Liberal Party winning again, it could possibly mean that the next election, we could be seeing what happened in the States, so to speak, like with the mandate with the Republicans. Possibly now we'll see the mandate with the Conservatives. I don't know.
Depends on results, honestly. Like, I think, like, to credit Pierre, like, I think he actually had one of the most profound impacts on Canadian politics ever.
I would agree. I
mean, he did his job too well. Like, he literally made it so that Freeland defected, Trudeau stepped down. Like, as a leader of the opposition, like, that would be like literally the target outcome.
Everything except winning that prime ministership.
But had he not done that and actually run against Trudeau, he would have won.
He would have won.
He'd be the winner right now. So he did his job too effectively, and he opened the door for that. So, but the interesting part from my perspective, and again, like I'm glad I kind of put the disclaimer on like what my politics are before. Fair. I think that a lot of people are like, oh, Carney stole Pierre's plan, his platform. It's like, well, is it a good platform or not? Because if it's a good platform, because you thought it was good when it was in Pierre's hands, do we like it or not? Because you're not like it anymore because the color's different. Yeah. So I would agree that they've borrowed a lot or stolen a lot. But that's what you want. Like, again, this is, if Pierre's putting forward good policies, you want, like, if you actually want the best for your country and you believe those are good policies, then you want them to be stolen and implemented. And so I think he's done an effective job, and through that process, he took the Liberal Party from this like absolute maniacal leftist like stuff that no Canadians could relate to the historically like centrist party that they were, that is more relatable to Canadians, and the fact that they actually had to elect like basically a crony capitalist like central banker, like old white guy to win the election against Pierre tells me like that we've progressed just from Pierre's political pressure that he put on the Liberal Party to get rid of all of that. We've progressed so far as a country towards, and I actually think that this is the part that interests me the most, is if you assume that 40% of the population voted for Pierre, 40% of the voting population voted for Carney, and their platforms were identical, doesn't that mean that Canadians are in the most agreement that we've ever been, ever? Yeah. But we can't just take a minute to stop and celebrate that and go out there on the streets and be like, hey, look, like we probably agree on housing, we probably agree on immigration, we probably agree on government spending. Instead, we're at each other's throats because your color's this and your color's that, right? It's like this.
It is very divided. Strategically, I think it was a great play by the Liberal government. You have to give them the credit. They turned around. They were done. Like they were obliterated. It was.
Yeah, like there was a moment where, I mean, had Jagmeet Singh allowed an election to happen before the end of last year, they would be the second party, and the Liberals almost would have lost party status. Yeah. Like Jagmeet Singh would have been the leader of the opposition. He literally.
He dropped the ball there, big
dude. There's out there.
You
think Pierre's loss was bad? That dude literally imploded an entire party.
Yeah, he did. He single-handedly did. It's very well said, because you look at how it unfolded for them. What do they have? 7 seats now, I believe. Yeah. So it's very unfortunate to how it worked for them. But yeah, I would have liked to see a different result. But ultimately, that's where it is. Canadians vote.
Yeah. And I would have liked to see a different result as well. But I mean, the part that disappoints me the most about the result is that young people had the opportunity to change the fate of their country, and they chose not to be honest with you. Like, I mean, polling numbers are what tells me the most about the country, and young people didn't show up. They want to sit and yell in my Instagram comments and your Instagram comments and call people names and all this shit, but they don't show up to vote when it matters. And if you think about And this is where I think where Pierre dropped the ball, because we tried to have him on our show before the podcast, and a couple of other guys I know that are big in the podcasting space tried the same thing. What did Donald Trump do when he he went and did all the shows, but he wasn't there talking politics. He was talking to young people and saying, like, this is an important part of democratic history, and if you don't, you have to go out and vote. I don't even really care. I'm not even going to tell you to vote for me. Just go out and vote. Like that, you have to exercise your right. Otherwise, democracy dies. And young people have not been doing that. They're sitting and whining online, and they're not showing up at the polls. And the polling numbers show that. And they're just going to continue sitting and whining and saying, boomers installed the Liberal Party again. It's like, yeah, because they went and fucking voted.
You got to vote, man.
That's it.
I highlight that so much, Dan. It's so well said, man. And it's really, the importance is that you can't sit there and complain about what's happening with crime, with taxes, with your purchasing power, etc., and then not show up and vote.
Right. You get what you vote for. You vote for nothing, you get nothing.
Exactly. And maybe that maybe you don't agree with both parties, but find something that you do like and pick your poison. I'd say it all the time. It's the necessary evil that we need to grapple with, because politics has influence, and it brings us to where we are today.
For sure.
So I really appreciate your time, man. I have one final segment on Couple Casuals podcast, which is called Salute. I give an opportunity to the guests to just end us off with a piece of advice, encouragement, any way to just end us off here.
I mean, I think the thing that I would say is people have to not play into the hand of the politicians. Like, the whole thing is designed to divide us right now. Like, you look at like socialist countries, or you look at like China. Like, in China, they have if you're an autocrat, like if you're a dictator, you have such a hard job because you need 100% of the country. Like, it would only take 10% of the country to like stage a revolution, and so you really need to like have a high satisfaction rate. In a democratic society, you really only need to keep like a small portion of the population. I mean, it was like less than 30% of the population that just decided the last election. So you don't need to keep a huge portion of the population happy. We need to understand that like we collectively have way more power than politicians over our individual lives, over the economy, and like especially for conservatives. Like, I see a lot of conservatives whining that like, you know, and like, I mean, my politics probably would typically lean more economically conservative. Socially, like social politics, I don't really understand it. I don't even think about it. But a lot of conservatives don't think about the idea of individual personal responsibility, right? They blame the government for their circumstances and why everything's bad and all those things. It's like, we are Canadians, right? We have to work together to do these things in spite of the horrible circumstances that, you know, or the election outcomes or whatever that we wanted to. And I do think that we're being told that we're more divided than we ever have been in history, but I actually think we are more united, and we just need to find that and celebrate that and actually work together on building a country. That's what this country is, right? For your parents, you know, moved here from Italy, or your grandparents moved here from Italy. My Opie moved here from Russia after surviving the Romani genocide, and met my Omi from Switzerland, who, you know, I mean, like that's, and then for 50 years they built businesses, started families, like, you know, that, where did that go? Right? They pushed us in the last 20, 30 years, they built a bunch of oligopolies. Basically, the last time we had an economic correction in the 1990s, all the trust companies went away. Now we have a banking oligopoly that functionally runs this country. And they turned us all into workers rather than builders.
Yes.
Right? If we want to have a future for our country, we have to take it back, and we have to be willing to build and work together. We have to work together to do that.
That's a great message, man. I really appreciate your knowledge and the value you brought to this conversation. I really enjoyed it, Dan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And best of luck to you. And I look forward to seeing more of the content come up, man. It's beautiful. It's amazing.
Thanks, dude.
I appreciate you, and I appreciate all you guys, man. Until next time, I love nobody else. Ciao.